So, they say a dog is a man's best friend, but just imagine if your pet could actually save your life by detecting cancerous cells in your body simply by sniffing you, or by predicting the onset of a life-threatening diabetic episode.
Well, according to Claire Guest and Kimberly Cox from the charity Cancer and Biodetection Dogs, that could just be the start of their amazing abilities, and they join us now along with Rory and Tangle, the adorable dogs, to tell us more. Actually, Tangle looks as if he's completely relaxed. Look at that. He's lying down having a snooze, whereas Rory's a bit more on guard. Claire, let's start with you first. You have been studying the relationship between humans and animals for some time. You're a human psychologist, a dog trainer, canine behaviour therapist, behaviourist, can't say the word. You've trained dogs for the deaf. And why, then, did you suddenly happen upon this idea that a dog can detect cancer, particularly in a human body?
The story really started with anecdotal stories. So these are pet dogs living in their homes with owners, and the owners were noticing real changes in their dogs, and as if the dogs were trying to warn them about something. There were about 30 stories across the world of dogs indicating by sniffing and licking at, say, a mole on somebody's leg, which has led that person to go to the doctor, and they've subsequently found that they've got malignant melanoma.
You were talking about Trudy, the Dalmatian.
That's right, and actually Gillian Lacey's a very good friend of mine, so that was the first story, and interestingly she was one of the first stories in the world that indicated that the dog might be actually picking up on an odour that was coming off this mole that was making the dog behave in a certain way. So I became very interested, along with somebody called Dr. Church, as whether or not cancer had an odour, and we discovered in 2004 that in fact it did, and that dogs could be trained to identify it.
You obviously have to do a lot of research to make sure that this isn't just a one-off, and that some dogs perhaps are better to it than others, and you can't. Can you 100% trust it?
Yeah, I mean, how you do it is by running sort of clinical trials that are double-blinded, so nobody knows, the trainers don't know, obviously the dogs don't know, and none of the scientists know, and we keep running and running the dogs, and until running them on samples, I'm going to sit with you, running them on samples where there are lots of other diseases present, but only one of the samples would have cancer, and you have to be sure that the dog's only picking the cancer odour.
Wow.
That's what we're doing.
And which cancers can the dogs pick out?
Well, at the moment, Tangle's trained to detect cancers from urine samples. So we're looking at, we know they can detect bladder cancer, and we're now looking to see whether they can detect prostate cancer.
And how does Tangle do it?
What he does is he runs along a sample. He only takes a very quick sniff of the sample. Almost looks like he's just walking past it.
But these are little bowls of urine?
Yes, little bowls of 0.5 of a ml of urine. And as soon as he comes across some cancer volatiles, so cancer cells that are giving off chemicals, he lies down beside them.
We've got some footage that you shot. It's unfair to ask Tangle to do it live with the studio light, so it's slightly more controlled earlier on. It's a little quieter, not quite so bright or so noisy. So this is it happening. Talk us through this morning.
So yeah, so you see, just running along the samples, takes a very brief sniff, and he's sniffed in that sample that there's cancer volatiles, and that is a sample from somebody who unfortunately has got bladder cancer, and he lies with his head on the pot and won't move until I come and get him.
Now, presumably this is done after diagnosis, so you can test that he can spot that, but how accurate is he at a positive diagnosis before the doctor or clinicians can look at it?
Well, what we're doing at the moment is we're working towards, with scientists, to try and find out what the dogs are using to make this diagnosis, because eventually it won't be that there'll be a dog in every doctor's surgery. Very different with the diabetic detection dogs, as you'll hear, but these dogs are really being used to help the scientists and the doctors. At the moment, we're doing another clinical trial. I mean, Tangle has been, his percentages have been up in the 80%, and the interesting thing is that the dogs seem to find it easier to find a small tumour than a large one. That seems to be because by the time a tumour is very large, there's a whole range of other things going wrong in the body, which almost mask the smell of the tumour.
Wow. So, but early detection is fantastic. And
absolutely.
Isn't it the case that somebody who had cancer and was given the all clear, Tangle kept worrying and saying, no, this sample isn't right?
Exactly that. We were sent a sample from the hospital, and it was the Bucks NHS Trust we worked with. The sample came through. The gentleman had had a cystoscopy, so he'd had his bladder looked at, had no cancer of the bladder. His sample came through as a control, so actually something for Tangle to ignore. Tangle kept on persistently indicating every time he came across his sample, lying down as you saw. And in the end, I spoke to a urologist who was so interested, he actually recalled the gentleman in, and the gentleman had a malignant tumour on his kidney.
So,
wow.
so will you be able to eventually find out what it is that the dogs are sensing, so that scientists can recreate that, so that you won't actually need the dogs?
Exactly that, in the future. Perhaps in 15 years' time, 10 to 15 years' time, people will go, men will go give a urine sample to the doctor, and that will be screened for volatiles.
Yeah.
In the same way as the dog's doing it, but by a machine, and then it will indicate whether you need further investigation.
And you work with Kimberly, who's
yes,
next to you, and Kimberly, your interest in dog training and things is, there's a coincidence because you're doing this, but it also happens to be that you have type 1 diabetes. And Rory, with you now, is a dog who's trained to help you if you find your sugar levels going low.
I'm really very lucky. The people we produce dogs for have no awareness of symptoms of their blood sugar falling low, so they just pass out. I'm very lucky during the day. I have very good symptoms, but Rory has woken me on 2 occasions at night to tell me my blood sugar was going low.
And how does that happen? What's the effect?
He does it from, well, we believe from high blood sugar has a pear drop smell, but low blood sugar is not supposed to have any odour, but somehow these dogs pick it up. And he sleeps by the side of my bed, and he comes up and licks my hand and alerts me and won't leave me alone until I get up. We've
got that as well, haven't we? I think let's have a look at this happening earlier on.
So what he'll do?
What you did there, you had a swab, didn't you?
Yes, that's right.
A sweat swab.
Because we can't put Kimberly into hypo in this situation. We use a swab which has her scent when she was in hypo last. She opened the pot and then he jumped up at her, alerting Kimberly to the danger. And then Kimberly asked him to go and fetch a blood testing kit, which is in that. Unfortunately, he thought it was on the other table, but he came to
found it eventually.
Yes.
Yeah, he found it eventually.
I suppose at home, though, it would always be in 1 or 2 places, definitely.
Yeah.
In a studio, he did very well to find it.
But it's all to do with that odour. So the odour comes out of the pot smells, the dog smells the odour, tells Kimberly, and she knows she's in trouble.
And then do they get a reward at the end of that? So that's why they can...
They learn that a person in hypo is very exciting because they always get a treat or a tennis ball.
Yes, yes, fantastic. Well, it's an absolutely wonderful thing, and so as medical advances go along and you can, invent a chemical nose to work these things out in the laboratories.
I think with the hypoglycemic detector dogs, I think that they will probably remain. I mean, all our dogs now are trained exactly like a guide dog, so they go everywhere with the person. And our first dog that was trained was for a gentleman. He's a lecturer in mathematics at Durham University, and he got to the point he was having 2 or 3 hypos a day, being taken into hospital once or twice a week. And his life was becoming such that he couldn't go anywhere on his own. So the dog warns him once or twice a day, and he now has complete independence back and hasn't had a hospital admission in 14 months. So.
Well, it's wonderful work that you're doing, and thank you both very much indeed. Well done, Rory. Well done, Tangle.
Thank you. I think he wants to stay with you, actually.
He's welcome. Stay with us. Thank you. Right, we're still to come. We've got all the royal gossip, so we'll see you in just a couple of minutes.